Welcome to the Truth Expedition. I'm your host, Mark Bischofsky, and on this program we dig for objective truth in this insane world where fact checkers outright lie and our own government propagandizes you and me, the citizens of this country. Week after week, I have been extremely blessed with amazing guests, and again, this week is no exception. Before I get into it, though, before I even announce who my guest is going to be, I have to do my job as an affiliate for the RNC store. If you watched my recent episode with John Richardson, the son of the late Dr. John Richardson, you heard us talk about apricot seeds or amygdalin or Laetrile and the health benefits of vitamin B17 that are in apricot seeds and their potential to prevent cancer. Again, I'm not going to promote any product on this show that I don't take myself and believe in 100%, but I would say read the book, A World Without Cancer. And you can get that at RNC Store as well, rncstore.com. And I guarantee if you read this book, you'll be buying these apricot seeds. I eat 10 to 20 of these per day. For me, I take them. There's a lot of cancer in my family. I take them to prevent cancer. There's a lot of research out there going back to the 60s and 70s saying they'll do just that. Use the code TruthExpedition at checkout, so rncstore.com. Use the code TruthExpedition. You'll get 10% off. They've got other products as well. And again, I do 100% believe these are good to put in my body. So today on the program, we're going to interview Joe Oltmann. I had the opportunity, the pleasure, the honor of meeting Joe at a recent event, the Greater Magistrates Tour in Wisconsin. He was on tour with Professor David Clements, Seth Keshel, Ivan Raiklin, and folks like that. These people have been involved with the Reawaken America Tour, the Cyber Symposium, Mike Lindell's Cyber Symposium. So Joe Oltmann is a hero in this truth movement, especially when it comes to election integrity. And his credentials back him up 100%. He's an amazing, amazing person, a patriot, a God-fearing patriot, and couldn't be luckier to be able to introduce Joe to you today on the program. So let's get into the interview. All right, our guest today has landed virtually thanks to Zoom. Joe Oltmann is from Denver, Colorado. He's got a managing interest in 9 companies spanning 7 different industries. He's worked extensively in the Middle East and North Africa on conflict resolution projects. He's the founder of the grassroots organization FEC United and PIN Business Network, which is a data company specializing in digital data collection, analytics, marketing deployment for companies and organizations of all sizes. You know, Joe is a social media influencer and a founding partner of the Conservative Daily Podcast. I'm going to say that again, the Conservative Daily Podcast. Everyone should be watching that. I've started watching it. It's entertaining and it's extremely informative. So please do tune into that. It's daily, as it says the title. But, you know, Joe's a truth seeker, as we all are. And I'd say a bit of a trailblazer in the election integrity space of this patriot movement. He's been a speaker in Mike Lindell's Cyber Symposium, the Reawaken America Tour, and most recently at the Greater Magistrates Tour, where I actually had a chance to meet Joe Oltmann. Thank you so much for gifting us some of your time today, Joe.
It's great to be here with you.
Yeah, like I said, as we were talking before the interview started, I'm embedded in the conservative movement deeply. I come from the medical field, and I really got involved in this movement. Again, this is not anything that's in the cards for me. God put me on a path, and I'm trudging forward the best I can. But most people in the medical freedom movement, I don't think are paying close enough attention to or are concerned enough about election integrity. And I would say if what medical freedom, that whole movement means nothing if we don't have elections that are fair and that we can trust.
Well, I would tell you this, how much chaos exists in the medical freedom environment. There's quite a bit of chaos. There's even dissension amongst those that are looking for medical freedom. If you go back 10, 15, 20 years, you start looking at vaccines and efficacies of vaccines, the people that do research on that side. You have a large group of people that are both Democrat, Republican, call themselves liberals and or conservatives, that are very equally aligned or equally yoked when it comes to, what is put in the bodies of our children or even themselves. So, I would say this: we can't imagine how evil is because we're not evil people. But if you take just a step back and start looking at the degradation of our society over the last 2 to 3 decades, nothing that we're experiencing today could happen without it being on purpose. And they can't do that without having legislative action that slowly boils us and adds to the amount of entitlements that the government receives from us. I mean, our taxes are 53 cents on every dollar goes to the government. You don't own your own home. You don't own your house, or excuse me, your car. And everybody's like, well, no, Joe, I paid my house off. I own it. No, you don't,
Yeah.
because you have to pay property tax on it. So you don't even own your own home. As a matter of fact, just so you're aware, more than 2% of the elderly population loses their home every single year due to tax payment defaults. So you have 2% of the people out there that are losing their homes. And until the Supreme Court ruling that says, hey, you can't have the spoils, you can only take the part that is the taxes that are owed, these municipalities, these states, and these governments were keeping all excess revenue. So you have an $8,000 default, $400,000 house, they would collect $400,000 and put the rest into a discretionary fund, and the person would basically be homeless. That is what our government has done to people that have worked their entire lives. So we really are in a state where we have to start paying attention to everything, but stripping away the chaos and just saying what is good for the American people. And frankly, the Medical Freedoms Unit, or excuse me, the Medical Freedom Group, I think there are parts of it that are starting to see what's happening. They're just trying to stay in their lane and get, more aligned with. If I can just solve this. Unfortunately, if you don't solve the election issue, you have no chance, because those legislators and people that are put in those positions, including judiciary, which the medical freedom movement relies on. They rely on good judiciaries in order to make sure that they can fight against the tyranny that happens against, the autonomy of your own bodies.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And I think kind of my point is that all the factions of our patriot movement, whether it be 2A or pro-life or medical freedom or elections, it'd be great if we could combine forces and have everyone at least a little interested in every area, so we can make our events bigger, get our actions more prominent and more effective. But for those of you who don't know, and I asked around, about half the people know who Joe Oltmann is in our medical freedom movement, and about half don't. But and I wasn't that aware. I'd heard your name, I'd seen your name around, but when I dig in, you've got an amazing story. So I don't want to speak for you, but your father was black, your mother was white, correct?
My dad's black, my mom's white. My whole family's interracial. Grew up in D.C.
Yeah,
Very, very poor. I mean, we didn't have much of anything. One of eight. A very, very, I would not say it was a tough upbringing, but I would say it was tough. Whites hate you because your dad's black. Blacks hate you because your mom's white. You get into this kind of conundrum of by the way, my parents were kids having kids. I mean, my mother was 17. She was 15 when she had my brother. So, this is, it was not the ideal situation. And for me to come out of that and to have as many blessings as I have today, it's just, again, it's just a testament to being faithful and maintaining, a focus on God.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, you're very successful. You've been blessed, and I think I've heard you say on other programs that it's been about 15 years at least where you've really, really been focused on your faith. So, what brought you into politics? And because you're, like I said, I think you're a bit of a trailblazer here, moving forward. And so, was it 2020 that did it?
Yeah, so I didn't pay much attention to politics, and I spent 6.5 years in the Middle East and Africa negotiating in conflict zones, in areas that most people wouldn't want to go. I concentrated most of what I did on one side, on the faith movement. So I was working with how do we bridge the divide between Muslims, Christians, and Jews. I learned Arabic, flying back and forth just so I could engage in the culture and in the language, but also understand if I was ever in any danger, I could actually know I was in danger before I was. So I did that for 6.5 years, saw some of the government apparatuses in the United States do really bad things to people in the Middle East and Africa. And I remember having to leave my passport at the border in order to get things done. And that's when I started to realize that this is a different world, and that nothing is as it seems. Everything is on the front, manifested to a large degree with a facade that doesn't represent what's really happening. I used to see things happen there, come back to the United States, and it would be the complete opposite story that you'd hear about what the area that I was just in. So, but I didn't get involved in politics. I took a kind of a back seat to that, and because my daughter went to high school and started getting bad grades, and I remember sitting in Qatar, in Doha, and I had just met with a ex Guantanamo Bay prisoner, Sam Al Haj, Guantanamo Bay prisoner 345, and I remember meeting with him and just being amazed by how humble and meek he was, considering what he went through. And I'm sitting in the terminal, and I get this message from my daughter's school that says your daughter's a wreck. So I looked at my friends and said, look, I think I'm gonna have to take a sabbatical. I'm gonna be out of commission. They asked for how long, and I said, well, until my kids graduate, so at least 7 years. And then I went home and found myself building a tech company, quite literally by accident. I like to tell people I'm like the Forrest Gump of business. I have no idea. I have really no idea how I was successful doing what I did. I don't have any educational experience that would have made it possible for me to go work in the Middle East and Africa, but I was very, very successful as a fixer and learned to read people very well and had an immense amount of success. And I've had an immense amount of success in business because I've used my guiding principles in my life and these things that I built mathematically to kind of figure out, what's good, what's bad, make sure that I stayed on the right track. And so I think my faith has, done a lot in my life to kind of push me in a direction where I then ended up in politics, which I regret. I mean, if we're being honest, I've got a PhD in politics now over the last 3 years, not literally from a university, but having to go through what I went through for the last 3 years. And I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. It is a cesspool of just people that are self-indulged. We have a lot of people that are involved in these movements that work for the intelligence community that are here to create controlled opposition. They are the ones that are typically propped up and that you see everywhere. I'm not going to name names, but I'm sure you can imagine a few that you question some of the motives of some of the things that were done. And I'm just a strong figure that has gotten out and spoke both authentically, truthfully. And in 2020, we saw them break down the constructs of the Constitution and of our basic fundamental rights. And I think that was, and then a friend of mine committed suicide. But I think that was kind of the catalyst for me to stand up. It had nothing to do with elections. I stood up for businesses. I watched as they shut down SMBs, small to medium businesses, and propped up Targets, Walmarts, and said, you guys aren't smart enough to, keep your people safe. So we're gonna crush your business, your dreams, your aspirations, take away your livelihood and things that you've worked on your entire lives, and we're gonna hand it to these big corporations. So if you want to, you can go from owning your own business to go be a greeter at one of these Walmarts, right? Then we'll make you essential. So we saw a lot of things that didn't make sense, and that led me to start FEC United, which stands for Faith, Education, and Commerce, the three pillars of our society. And I got attacked viciously for standing up for people in the community, and that led me to be on a call with Antifa, and led me to be on a call that I was looking for journalists, not for Eric Coomer. It led me to hear the words from him, check into him, and still not understand what I was dealing with. Like I didn't know that Dominion owned 50% of the vote of the American people. I didn't find that out until later, much later when I was, fatefully brought. And by the way, this happened a month and a half before the election. I didn't know the election could be stolen.
So this is sometime September 2020. And just so the audience knows, Eric Coomer is, I don't know, he's high up in the Dominion voting machines organization.
And Director of Strategy and Security for Dominion Voting Systems.
And Joe got on a call, like Antifa-led call, accidentally, and heard...
Well, not accidentally. I mean, there was a kid that was Antifa that wanted to prove that he was legitimately able to get access to the strategies of journalists, and the fact that they weren't journalists, they were Antifa activists. And so that's how I ended up on it. And I was just looking for the journalists because they were writing bad things. And in October, I wrote. I was standing at the deal, and we had an event for FEC United, and I said, I have infiltrated Antifa, and I found these journalists. I didn't mention Eric because Eric wasn't even a thing. But I found myself speaking about this on October 15th, and I said, we're coming for you. And since then, by the way, they all said that they weren't Antifa activists. They weren't a part of it. Now it's come out that they've all been dragged into the deal, and we found out they were actually Antifa. So they haven't told the truth about it. None of these people have told the truth about anything. And so that was 2.5 weeks before the election. And then I was up elk hunting on November 6th, 3 days after the election. We all saw what happened, the deviations of behavior, math and science. Nothing made sense to us. And that's when somebody sent me something that had Eric Coomer as the, he's now the spokesperson for Dominion Voting Systems. And I'm reading this article and I see his name, and literally my heart sinks. And I'm like, son of a biscuit. And that's when I started doing all the research, and I found out that he had social posts that were, I mean, frankly, it was bad. Anti-American, anti-Trump. He posted the Antifa manifesto a day after, or a couple of days after it was released from Germany. So, which, by the way, it takes about 10 days to get around the world, and he had it immediately, which means he was deeply embedded into what Antifa is.
Yeah, it's insane. We all good?
What is that? Is that
nothing on our end?
Apollo, you got something on your side. Apollo.
Yeah, what's up?
Sorry.
What do I have on my side?
There's a video that's playing in my ear. Sorry about that.
That's
I literally
all right.
had a video about elections playing in my ear.
Sorry, I forgot the routing was on my bed.
That's happened here before too. That happens. No big deal. So, what did Coomer say on the phone call then? I mean, it all kind of comes together for you after the election of what you actually heard on that call.
Yeah. So then the relevance of his position. So I knew he worked for Dominion Voting Systems. I had checked in very carefully into who he was, listened to videos, things like that, just to make sure it was the right person. But frankly, I thought it was hyperbolic. I didn't think that it was even possible to change the direction of an election. And so I didn't think much of him until after. And that's when, after seeing his social posts and seeing the things that he said, and frankly, it all came together. All of it came together. And then they own 50% of the votes. And then I found out that, so there's things that you learn over the following couple of weeks. So I took that, hey, don't worry about it. Trump's not going to win. I made effing sure of it. I had some notes that I had written that were previous notes because I was not the only one that was supposed to be on that call. Like a friend of mine was supposed to be on that call too.
So Coomer says, don't worry about it. Trump won't win. I'll make effing sure of it. And he's high up in the Dominion voting system.
And then I have people sending me stuff saying that he's a shareholder, that he owns the adjudication process. So I started checking into that. It was crazy what I learned about this guy. And I actually feel bad for him because, so when I came out on the 9th of November, there's a couple things that everyone needs to understand. Number one, no one was talking about Dominion. On November 6th, no one was talking about Dominion. That Friday when I was up elk hunting, no one. Dominion wasn't even a thing. What the thing was is that ballots are on trucks and they're coming in the middle of the night, and these sticks aren't working, but nobody's talking about anything having to do with Dominion. They're just not talking about it. And frankly, I didn't even know until I started digging in over the weekend that Dominion had 50% of the vote of the American people. I didn't know that either. I just thought, okay, you have Georgia, what other states? And then I thought maybe he was involved in Texas because of some of the social posts that he had. But I did not see the significance until I saw all that, put it all together, and I was like, oh no. And then I just reported on that Monday everything that I learned, and it was heavy. I told my wife that weekend, I go, our lives will never be the same. we have a decision to make. My best friend, who's 85, told me on that Friday, he's like, Joe, do me a favor. Don't get involved in this. Let somebody else do it. Just hand it off to someone and get away from it. Just walk away from it. And it's the first time I've ever had a negative conversation with him. And I was so angry because he is having me step away from what I think is something I have to do. Like I don't particularly like being in the public foray. I didn't do it for advertising clicks. I didn't do it so that I could have a podcast. I frankly, if we're being truthful, if it wasn't God putting me on this path, I wouldn't be on it. I would have been tech, sold my company, and moved on. By the way, in 2020, I was Ernst & Young Entrepreneur of the Year finalist. The second time that I've gotten that deal, and they said, look, if you'll just shut your mouth, Joe, because of all the stuff I said about the COVID deal, you'll win this. You'll sell your company for, a couple $100 million and you can move on. So there's a lot of things that I lost by stepping out and getting involved in this whole debacle. So it's not, so that Monday, I only talked about Coomer. And by Tuesday, I was getting death threats, people meeting me in supermarkets, telling me that they're coming after my wife and kids. And then, when you come after me, I've never seen a fight that I'd run away from. I've never picked a fight, but I've never seen a fight I'd run away from. And so at that point, I doubled down and then I just became more and more angry the more people showed up at my house with guns and sent powder through the mail and, attacked my wife and attacked my children. And so I finally, you reach a boiling point where now you're just pissed, right? These people are a bunch of criminals. But keep in mind, I did not look into Dominion until I got sued by Coomer, right? So Coomer came out and wrote an op-ed article, I think it was on December 8th or 9th, and the death threats against me intensified to a rate that's not even, people with binoculars at my office, right? Walking into restaurants behind me and my family. I had personal security detail for 18 months. I live in a house now with bulletproof glass and thermal cameras, and I have an AR-15 next to my bed, and I sleep with a gun underneath my pillow to this day. So we're almost 3 years later, and this is how I have to live my life, right? So all my family is trained with weapons. They had to be. I make sure that there's situational awareness. That's the life that I have to live because of the radical left.
Yeah, just based on doing the right thing, standing up for principle and core values. That's, it's a crazy world we live in, Joe, and I'm sure just like you, I'd rather be at home with my kids right now, but God puts you on a path, you stay on it. We know why we're doing it. But would you say when it comes to I feel like, I ran for office, it's, on election integrity, medical freedom, my own party, GOP, fought me. I've had a taste of the swamp. I can report it's full of blood-sucking parasites and
so
lizards.
Why did they fight you?
I won endorsements. So we have an endorsement process here. It's pretty rare. 5 states, I believe, have an endorsement process where the grassroots endorses the candidate. I got 82% of the votes from the grassroots, the widest margin in the state for a state House of Representatives. And I met with leadership, and they want you to basically fall in line with leadership. Do what we say. We'll support you. And I'm like, no, I won votes from the grassroots. I'm here to fight for them. I'm not going to make votes to grow government as you folks do time to time. I'm here for the people, period.
Yeah.
And so they don't want that. They want to control you 100%. And so they put up a primary opponent against me. They spent, reports are $55,000 to $75,000, kind of set records to fight against me. I did not win in the general. I believe they cheated in the general. I'm one of very few people here in Minnesota that ran for office that are willing to say I think the elections are stolen. But that's my next question. Do you believe, everyone hears about the drop boxes, the ballot harvesting, all of this. But to me, is that more of just kind of a smoke screen to divert from flipping a switch on a Dominion machine? Or is it kind of all of it?
So let me tell you, I did not get involved in Dominion. See, Dominion made a bunch of very bad decisions, right? And their bad decision is that they sent me early on a cease and desist, and you must keep everything, and we're coming after you. And I sent them back a letter that was basically like, you can kiss my you-know-what, I was like, I am so ready for you, because after the attacks that I got from Coomer, right, and the attacks I got from people in my home, then I doubled after he sued me, because he said that I made all those Facebook posts up, that all of that was fabricated. It wasn't real. And then he sued me after he deleted them. So he deleted all of his social, then he sued me. And so I'm like, all right, well, now my only goal is to prove that they stole the election in 2020. And was it possible that Dominion had the capability to do that? So I started talking to people around the country, getting access to manuals, putting it all together, doing a process that allows for you to condense all the publicly available information across the board in different states into one place where you can find out how they stole the election. And I was like, oh my gosh, I figured it out. I did it in 3 days, by the way. I think it was 2 or 3 days. And everybody's like, no, you didn't. And I was like, all right, I'm gonna build this model. So I built this model and I sent it over to people. And I was like, all right, here's why the system went down and went back up. And here's why it has them systematically in different states. And keep in mind, I did not know about the Edison Zero. I did not know about the PID function that was discovered in different states. I mean, frankly, I didn't know any of that. But what I did know is that I had all the system architecture, and I'm a system architect. And I knew that if you were going to steal it, based on the information within it, this is how you would do it. So I built a model, sent it to Washington. They said, Joe, can you fly to Washington, D.C. on January 4th? And I was like, sure, I'll fly in. So I flew in, and they started grilling me. And so I went through the model, and I was like, okay, I'm going to make the model prettier. So I made it prettier. And on the 5th, I was meeting with some prominent people that came in again to grill me from different intelligence communities, different parts of the government. And, I met with Patrick Byrne. He's like, oh, that's a nice theory. And I was like, this is not a theory. This is exactly how they stole the election. And then I got up and I was like, all right, I'm done. I left. And I have no patience for stupid. Like if you want to be the smartest guy in the room, you better have the experience for it. And I kept running into people who had different bits of experience. And I was a CEO of a tech company, right? I understood exactly what the architecture would have to be in order for the things to happen. That model today is still used as a validating tool against all of it. And everything that I said in that model before anybody got into a machine or anything else is 100% the way the elections are stolen. So they can falsify ballots. Mail-in ballots are the tool to it. They have the ability to build ballots out of thin air and suspend ballots inside of the adjudication process. They have the ability. We saw what happened with signature adjudication, the fact that it has a secondary connection that allows them to use an outside source to make sure that signature is verified. They separate the ballots from the envelopes 2 weeks before, 14 days before, 13 days before. And so I knew for a fact how they did it. I knew that they had to have an outside source, but I didn't believe that China beamed in. I didn't believe any of that. I'm like, listen, one person could do this across the entire country with a system that is designed with these faults. They just need access to, when they know who voted, they also know who didn't vote. So if you shut down the system, which is what they did in every single swing state and 9 other states across the country, when you shut down that system, you now know who voted. So now you know who didn't vote. If you have a secondary system, which we've proven by API exists into things like BPro, ERIC system, everything else, then all I have to do is take those suspended ballots that are inside the adjudication process, and then I just have to adapt because you can build them out of thin air. You can even make them look like somebody filled them in. I can adapt that, boom, plug it right into the system, and away you go. And because I know what ballots I then randomly chose people that didn't vote, then like what happened in Maricopa County, where all the boxes were open, they just walked in and just threw ballots from different precincts in different boxes to make sure that the count matched up, because they already knew. They just randomly did it and dropped 30 precincts into one box.
Unreal. How many people do you think need to be involved in this operation? A lot of these, the Manhattan Project, there were hundreds of thousands of people working on it, but it was so compartmentalized that really only 5 people knew what they were doing. I mean, how many people do you think are at the top of this cabal rigging these elections that are actually controlling it? I mean, could it just be a handful?
All right, listen, John Bolton said that he has done coups in other countries, not in the United States, but he's done them in other countries, right? So check mark number 1, boom. The intelligence apparatus I think very few people knew about the apparatus itself. I think the CIA was involved. I think the FBI is involved. I think the DHS was involved. I think HSS was involved. There's no question that there are people that are involved. But see, there's another thing that people don't understand, and that is you can compartmentalize someone's job as a piece of the puzzle, and they have no idea what puzzle they're plugging into, right? So they could be doing things that are innocuous to some, but fill the solutions of making sure that process happens. You do not need a lot of people with an electronic system in order to steal elections, not in this country or any other country. And we know because Dominion was involved in what happened in Mongolia. They were kicked out. Eric Coomer personally was in Mongolia dealing with those elections and selling that system both in 2012. So we know fully that we can look at different elections with Venezuela. We can look at what happened in Brazil. Come on. I mean, the Brazil election, you would have to be as dumb as a rock to think that somewhere along the line that the Brazilian people took a guy out of prison and put him at the pulpit in a highly Catholic, highly religious state where you have this atheist demon that represents everything that's not good about society, and then they put him in the thing. So, I mean, there's a bunch of things that we know across the world that have happened. You know, the Dominion Code was built in Serbia. We know about an entire what's it called? Stealing of people's identities, identity theft ring that happened in Romania by a man who went to the FBI, met with the FBI, told them that this is a system that's being built in order to steal elections dating back to all the way to 2006. So, and by the way, this is not hyperbolic stuff I'm saying to you. It's not made up. I didn't get it from a third hand. I did all my own research. I looked into the system. We 1,000% know that the elections were stolen in 2020. There's no evidence. There's mountains of evidence, mountains. You have the Mesa report. You have what's coming out of Georgia. You have the vote switching that happened in an election where they only honored the vote switching for a Democrat candidate in a county in Georgia. You have Virginia, where people have been arrested in that state. You have people all over the country who are getting arrested. You have California, where you had the recall election with Newsom, where you had a quarter of the people that signed up for the recall election, and yet he got more votes in the recall than he did in the general primary. Come on now. I mean, these are not serious people.
It does not make any sense. I mean, so what, in fact, this studio I'm using right here is with an organization called Action for Liberty. They're an amazing group of patriots, and they work in the conservative movement here in Minnesota, probably one of the most effective statewide organizations. I've been trying to get them to really focus on the election integrity thing, and they're like, yeah, it's sketchy, but there's no smoking gun. And
there absolutely is.
That's what I
100% there is.
Yeah,
there's a ton of smoking guns. You can go to theprofessorsrecord.com, theprofessorsrecord.com, and you can literally look through. David Clements has done a good job. He was a lawyer, so he put all this stuff in one place where you can go grab different records. There's also, if you want access to more information that kind of keeps popping up its head, we have a private access to data that spans all 50 states and looks at collective evidence that it was anomalies that happened. You have the cast vote records and the report that came out of Mesa County and the reports that Mike Lindell funded specifically related to cast vote records that show that they have cast vote records from 19 states that follow the same algorithmic modeling, which, by the way, if you were a financial auditor and you had the information that I'm telling you about on cast vote records and the fact that this PID function was 100% outside of the norms, not by 1% or 2%, but by nearly 70%, you would arrest someone for financial crimes. If you were the IRS, if you were, Lehman Brothers, this is how they actually uncover crimes, right?
Yeah.
And yet nothing to see here.
Yeah, in fact, Minnesota, they just finished their legislative session here, and we went totally woke here. Minnesota's like ground zero for abortion up to the minute of birth, trans movement. It's a genital mutilation destination state now, but they just passed a bill. We've been trying to get cast vote records from all these different counties. Oh, we don't have them. They don't exist. But they just passed legislation saying they will not provide cast vote records in the future. So our hands are tied.
They're not tied though. See, this is where the it gets interesting. Everyone says, "Well, Joe, you push to violence," and I'm like, "No, we don't push to violence. We push to force. You push to force." Look, here's what you know about Antifa and BLM and all of these radical leftist activists, right? They're paid. They are paid agitators. Well, you know what's not paid? The American people that has their kids. The alignments that need to happen in Minnesota should be the Muslim population, who, by the way, this transgenderism stuff, that doesn't fly with them.
They don't agree. They're conservative people, actually.
And we've got to get people of faith in the Christian church, who, by the way, have been told that Muslims are the demons or the devils. They're not. I'm going to tell you right now, they're not. And I spent a lot of years there. You could say, well, Allah is different than God, and they would probably argue the same. But here's what is the same. The spirit of, by the way, Allah in Arabic means God, just so we're clear, right? It's al-Masih, Jesus the Messiah, is in the Quran, right? And the stories in the Quran are the same or similar to that's in the Bible. Now, I'm not telling you that one is true and one isn't true. I am a Christian. I believe that the Bible is the true word of God, 100%, right? But what I'm telling you is that we have to start making unlikely alliances and make sure that pushes us towards a place where we have absolute peace and reconciliation in a way that we can live together as brothers and sisters in Christ. And that is biblical. And it doesn't matter if what they believe. Our job is to be a ambassador of truth. It is to stand firmly in our faith, and it is to do things to protect our children, grandchildren, and future generations. This life is a test. God is putting us into a test. And if we want to pass that test, we got to be willing to make full sacrifice and make sure that we love on people and set aside differences, whether we see them petty or not. Set them aside, get together, and apply force to these legislative bodies and say, listen, you can't take our tax dollars and then tell us what we can and cannot see. That's slavery. That is not, that has nothing to do with you representing our interests. Those aren't our interests. Our interests are transparency. When we take away transparency, that means you have something to hide. That means that this is tyranny. And so if we want to break it down, we've got to meet in the middle. We got to get people. I'm talking about gang members, which, by the way, believe the election was stolen. Why do I know that? Because I spend Saturdays with gang members playing football. I practice what I preach. I spend time hanging out with young men and men that are incarcerated, some of them for 20, 25 years.
I saw your show with Jamal. That was awesome.
What an amazing young man.
Yeah.
And I pray for him. I encourage him. I tell him, listen, you have been forgiven. You are gonna have an amazing life, right? That is what it means to truly stand and be authentic. Is that we don't allow men and women to walk around with scarlet letters, and we've allowed it for too long. My business partner is a gay married Jewish father of two. He's one of my best friends, and you say, well, he's gay, and I was like, listen to me. Not my job. He has to wear that on the outside of his shirt. Everyone knows he's gay. Many of us, and this has nothing to do with the election, many of us have scarlet letters inside that we get to hide any shame we may have associated with that. He has to wear it on the outside. So I'm going to love on him. I'm going to let the things he has to work on with God be with God, and the things that I get to love on him with, and that I get to be his friend, and that I get to make sure that I'm there for him. That's what it means to be. It doesn't mean I have to like it. Look, the transgender deal, I'm going to tell you right now, that's evil. That's co-opting people that already have. Gay people have no place in that fight. They've co-opted everything with this evil, satanic mutilation of and grooming of our children. We have to accept. We have to call that what it is. But at the same time, I've spent time with the Gays Against Groomers, and these are great men and women. They're
good group.
They're just good people. You can say, well, you can't set aside. You got to stay in your faith. You can stay in your faith and love on people and create alliances that lead towards a better future. You can do that without giving up any of your principles.
Yeah, there's a lot for the viewers out. There's a lot to love about Joe Oltmann, but I've listened to a lot of your speaking, your podcasts. What I love most is your willingness to meet people where they are and to love thy neighbor. And that is that is an awesome message, and that is what we need to do if we're going to win this battle, because conservatives need to be united, or we're going to lose this country. We're at a precipice here, and we're nearing an end if we don't step up.
Amen. This is the time of great restoration. And it doesn't mean, by the way, that I won't take somebody to the mat. It doesn't mean that if they come after me, that I'll pray for them after if they try to do harm to people around me. It just means that I'm willing to be consistent in character, and I'm willing to say what truth is. And truth is the elections were stolen in 2020. They were stolen in 2022. They're going to try and steal them again in 2024. They're already positioning themselves for that. Every part of every movement is got to be concentrated on making sure that we understand that the machines are a massive problem, and that with the machines, you can't outvote them. And we've got to get past the idea that, oh, come on, that can't happen. 100,000 people, and quit thinking that we're the smartest guys in the room. Have humility, and then stand and have a conversation. But we got to be willing to do it. We got to be willing to have those conversations and set aside this entrenchment that we, even as Christians, even as believers, we constantly entrench ourselves. It makes it very, very difficult for you to have a paradigm crash if you're not willing to look straight down the barrel and say, listen, I need to understand. Help me. I need to seek to understand. And then from there, you might be wrong. You might be wrong. And with that, you end up in a better place as a nation and as a society.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I thank you so much, Joe. And to the viewers, Joe's going to, I think, get to his podcast now. So thanks for joining us on the Truth Expedition. I've got goosebumps. This is one of my, if not the best show. I mean, even though it was a little shorter, great tidbits of wisdom and great energy and a great message, Joe. So thank you so much for joining us.
All right. God bless you.
All right. Thanks for tuning into the Truth Expedition. Stay free. Don't tread on me. Don't shed on me.